Well, let me take a moment to say, officially, welcome. For those of you who may not know, my name is Malou Fairley Collins, and I am the endorser with the Alliance of Baptists, and I also help to support the Thrive team. I guess we can say we're a team, right, Kevin? Kevin is one of the folks on Thrive who's here right now with us. And so we started this last fall, these prophetic imagination gatherings, and this is the first one of 2023. So I am so excited that you guys are here. We're starting off strong. As you know, in the past, the way we have done this is we have a two-part session for each one. The first part, you get a lot more information. You either have a lecture or a panel discussion or some sort of hybrid. And then the second part, you get a little bit more concept, but we'll do a deep dive in with small group work. So we're continuing that same type of process again for this one. So this first one, we're going to have a nice, robust discussion and panel discussion with three excellent individuals. I'm so excited to have them here. And so that's going to be the bulk of what we do tonight is going to be this panel discussion. There will be a time where you can write some questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll have time to get to those. If not, I will save those questions in the chat and we will definitely get to them in our second session. Okay, so this is the first, and our second session is March 21st. And there'll be a slide with more detailed information about that once we get to that time. A few things to say about Zoom. One, of course, like I said, please mute yourselves when you're not talking. Also, please be mindful that we have this reactions button down at the bottom so we can still do call and response. If you like something, give it a shout out, right? Oh, I loved it. If it was exciting, oh, we're partying. And if it was the funniest thing you ever heard, okay, so the point is, through these reactions, we can still have a bit more of kind of, oh, I love, see Doug clapped his hands, I love it. So we can have a bit more interaction, okay? That's a way to feel like we're talking to each other the whole time, even if we can't speak directly. And also the chat, if there's something that happens and you really like it and you want to say an amen or praise be, you can put that in the chat as well, okay? I will be looking at the chat. All right, so we are here for our PI gathering. Our subject for tonight is extensions of care in the time of Black Lives Matter. Now, one of the things that you may not know about me is outside of being an endorser, I am also an ACPE certified educator, along with Danny here and Amy Canosa. I just happen to see her on here, so I'm calling her out. So as a certified educator, I live in the realm of spiritual care and providing spiritual care for people, teaching people how to provide spiritual care. Now, we said extensions of care in the time of Black Lives Matter, and we said pastoral care because it's congregational, and so we're thinking of it in terms of the church. But I'm gonna tell you now that myself and Danny, we're so used to saying spiritual care that we might slip up. So if you hear us say spiritual care, just know we're still talking about pastoral care, okay? Also, we spend a lot of time with chaplains. So if you hear Danny say something about a chaplain, just think pastor or think lay leader in the church, okay? Because these things apply in that environment as well. But sometimes, you know how it is when you're so used to kind of your lane, you might still use those words, but understand this good information you're getting, it applies whether you are a chaplain, whether you are a pastor, whether you are a lay leader, so on and so forth, okay? All right, so now with that context, let me take a moment to introduce the one and only Reverend Danny Buhuro. I'm also gonna go ahead and pin both of us. Let's put a pin on you and put a, well, actually just a pin on you. I'm just pinning you, so they just see you, Danny. All right. Danny is the Executive Director and CPE Supervisor of Sankofa CPE Center, LLC. They are also the author of Spiritual Care in the Age of Black Lives Matter, examining the spiritual and prophetic needs of African Americans living in a violent America. Reverend Dr. Buhuro attended Chicago Theological Seminary, where they earned a Master's of Divinity and a Doctorate of Ministry degree. Are you currently working on your PhD or did you finish it already?
Oh, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I'm currently working on it. Yes.
Another, oh my goodness. Oh wow. Okay. And you're currently working on your PhD. Okay, studying social media identity, violence, and pastoral theology. Whew. I welcome you. I welcome you. I welcome you. You do so much. It's just amazing that you have the time to be able to be with us on today. Tell me when you'd like me to put your slide up. I'm just going to kiss my baby goodnight real quick, but you go right ahead.
Okay. All right. Good evening. So good to see each and every one of you here tonight. Good to see you, Amy. Good to see everyone who is gathered here tonight. I'm so excited for us to have this conversation. I'm so excited that we will have this talk. And so, as there's a particular slide that's getting ready to be shared at this time, I want to invite you, if you don't have pen and paper, to quickly grab pen and paper, have pen and paper handy during this time. You're going to also receive this image or slide at the conclusion of our time at the conclusion of our time together. We are so used to hanging out in that purple circle. We are pastors, lay leaders, chaplains, clergy. We are community social justice activists. And being all of these identities, usually looking at the image you see being shared with you on the screen right now, when we think about caring for folks, we're so used to caring for people's soul, faith, religion, or theological concerns. And that's understandable. This field of pastoral care in the United States first was introduced in 1959 by a gentleman by the name of Stuart Hiltner. And Stuart Hiltner primarily believed that pastoral care, in some sense, was shepherding folks in their relationship with God. Stuart Hiltner had a very Christological perspective of pastoral care, and he also, in some sense, believed that pastoral care was primarily only that pertaining to, again, soul, faith, theology. But what we're discovering from 1959 to 2023, we're discovering that there's so many other parts of people's being that deserve care. We can't simply provide care to one part of people's being, their soul or their faith or theological or religious concerns. We are now in 2023 grappling with other parts of people's being. And how do we offer, my favorite H word, holistic care to people? What does it mean as clergy, as pastors, as chaplains, as pastoral care providers, as spiritual care providers, as social justice activists to care for the body or social needs of people and to care for the emotional or life meaning and purpose or mind needs of people? In 2023, we are proposing in some sense that we now shift our ways of care to a more holistic way of care. So let's talk specifically. About this. We say, in some sense, we are called first and foremost, in addition to caring for soul, faith, or theological concerns that people have, we're called to care for a body, or in some sense, the social concerns that many people have today. So, one reflective question that I would invite you to ponder for a moment is, what is, or what are, if there's more than one, the systemic sociological ills that exist in the community of your congregation? I'll repeat that, and I hope you can jot that down in your notes. What are, or what is, the sociological ills, isms, or concerns that exist in the community of your church? Let me give you an example. If you're wondering, I don't know what a sociological ill is. A sociological ill can be classified as homelessness, poverty, food insecurity, lead poisoning, substandard homes, poor water quality, poor air quality, pollution. These are examples of sociological ills that exist in many communities today. There is a wonderful image that I want to invite you to Google and check out after this presentation. The title of it is called Three Realms of ACEs. Three Realms of ACEs. Realms spelled REALMS, and ACEs is ACE. Three Realms of ACEs. ACEs is an acronym meaning adverse childhood experiences. If you were to Google this image, there is a wonderful image that talks about the sociological trauma that exists in many communities today. And so, first and foremost, we are proposing new, creative, innovative, prophetic ways for pastors, clergy, and laypersons to care for folks today is to reflect on when was the last time you did a community needs assessment? Community needs assessment. What's a community needs assessment? A community needs assessment is an assessment that you conduct that basically highlights, wow, here's all the sociological resources that exist in my community. So no matter what city or state you reside in, if I was homeless and I walked up to you at church and said, hey, Pastor Pam, or hey, Pastor Cassandra, or hey, Pastor Cheryl, I'm homeless. I would hope that you would have done a community needs assessment where you have literally a pamphlet or a booklet in your church office that outlines here's where all the social service organizations are in this community around the church. Here's where all the domestic violence shelters are. Here's where all of the homeless shelters are. Here's where all the LGBTQIA advocacy organizations are. Here's where all the food pantries and soup kitchens are, right? Here's all of the social workers or therapists who have offices in this community. Caring for the body or social needs of persons in some sense means how are you acting as a connector to provide sociological resources to people? And in some sense, what are the ways in which you've done a community needs assessment to say, wow, if people in our community are desiring this particular sociological resource and it doesn't exist, how can I pick up the mantle of prophetic imagination at my faith community and begin that particular sociological resource? So what would it look like for your church to start a soup kitchen, a food pantry, a homeless shelter? Anything that is lacking in your community that you experience folks expressing a great need for, we want to invite you to pick up the mantle and start that. We also highlight, back to our image, in some sense, we have to grapple with what are the emotional needs of people in our community. There's a wonderful therapist that I want you to check out. Her name is Monica Williams. First name spelled Monnica. 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 Last name Williams. She is a clinical psychologist. And she recently coined a new term called racial trauma. Racial trauma. You can Google this term to learn more information about it. In some sense, Dr. Williams highlights racial trauma now causes PTSD, depression, and other forms of anxiety in persons of marginalized racial groups. And now racial trauma is even being recognized as a part of the DSM-5. If there is a such thing as racial trauma, then we have to assume there's a such thing as sexism trauma, patriarchy trauma, and homophobia trauma, and transphobia trauma, and ableism trauma, and Islamophobia trauma, and anti-Semitism trauma. Every ism that exists, just like racial trauma, actually causes trauma in people today. And so now we are recommending, how do we care as pastors and laypersons and clergy for the emotional needs of our congregants? We are inviting all pastors to become trained in mental health first aid to care for the systemic sociological trauma that folks are in our congregations are experiencing today. So we want to invite you, if you have never taken a mental health first aid training course, we want to invite you to do that. You can simply Google mental health first aid, and there's tons of classes in person and online for small fees that are being offered. So that when folks are experiencing some sort of traumatic event or having some sort of cluster of traumatic symptoms as a result of experiencing a traumatic event, this occurs during your particular church service or another type of event you're having at the church, you know how to move into action with caring for them. We're saying, in some sense, when folks have experienced trauma, they need more than prayer. They need more than a Bible passage recited to them. They need more than a gospel song sung to them. And so we want to give you the keys and the tools to begin to work with people around their emotional concerns and their life meaning and purpose wrestles. We say that it's so important to act as a sounding board for folks as they grapple with, why on earth am I here? Now more than ever, we are saying many people are struggling with, in light of COVID-19, in light of police brutality, in light of systemic sociological issues that continue to, unfortunately, rear its ugly head in 2023. Many people are grappling with existential concerns. Existential meaning a big word for simply wondering two important questions. Who am I? And what am I called to do? Two simple questions that many folks today in your congregations are wrestling with. Who am I? And what am I called to do? And so we are asking pastors and clergy and laypersons to act as sounding boards, to begin to reflect back to people, hey, let me journey with you in the spirit of accompaniment and bounce off ideas and have you bounce off ideas around what are your gifts, what are your skills, what are your talents, what are your hobbies, to get you to be thinking about, what's your new life meaning and purpose? Last but not least, on our image, we say many people today, now more than ever, are wrestling with three unhealthy theological beliefs that are causing some soul, faith, or religious or theological crisis. Many people today are wrestling with three unhealthy theological beliefs. The first unhealthy theological belief is that this crisis, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's an illness, whether it's police brutality, this crisis is a punishment from the divine, in this case, God. That's right. Many people are experiencing their current crisis as a punishment because, unfortunately, there's been bad theology that's gone viral in the last 3 weeks, especially on Facebook. Amy can testify to this. I've been struggling so much on Facebook. I have to hold myself back because I keep getting into Facebook fights because not any of you amazing, wonderful clergy on this line tonight, but there are some clergy from particular denominations, none of them Baptists, of course, who have been promoting a terrible scripture in light of COVID-19. If my people who are called by my name will turn from their wicked ways, then I will heal the land. And now that scripture's gone viral, and many folks think, oh, COVID-19 must be punished. We need to repent. Another unhealthy theological belief system that many people wrestle with today is that they are present day Job and Jobeth. that their crisis, that their illness is a test from God, that somehow the devil was out walking the earth looking for somebody to tempt, and God said, have you considered my servant Kevin? And now all hell breaks loose in Kevin's life because God is using Kevin as a pawn in a wager with the devil. And last but not least, a third unhealthy theological belief system that's gone viral, especially in the last 3 years, is that somehow, some way, God is far away, and God is indifferent to our circumstance. We want to remind people, caring for people's soul, faith, and theological needs is reminding folks, no, this is not a test. No, this is not punishment for sin. No, God is not indifferent to you. But Emmanuel, God is with you during this time. And so a cool acronym that I created is how are we caring for the social needs, emotional needs, life meaning and purpose needs, and faith needs of folks, which spells simply the word self. That is under, side note, that is under copyright. I love the Alliance of Baptists, but if you steal it, I'm going to have to sue you, and that's going to be the end of that. And so you can use this self motto and really begin to engage in something. How are you offering holistic care to your congregants to your congregants today? Thank you, thank you, thank you. I turn it back over to Malu.
Thank you so much. Could you please repeat the second belief, Danny, for us, and then we'll go into having Mia and Ryan introduce themselves.
Many people believe either their crisis or their illness is a punishment from God, or their crisis or their illness as a test. Somehow they're being tested and they've got to win this test someplace, somewhere, based on the biblical story of Job. They are present day Job or Jobette, and God is using them to make a wage as a pawn in a wager with the devil. So now they can't question God. They have to be loyal. They can't question God. They can't be angry at God. They can't be upset with God. And lastly, there's the unhealthy theological belief that says God is just indifferent to my circumstance.
Okay, no, we're good. You're good on that one. It was the second one. That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. And the acronym is just SELF. It's SELF. And just so you guys know, you will get a copy of that slide. So don't worry, you don't have to memorize it. You will get a copy of that slide. So, okay. So thank you so much, Danny, for your kind of introducing us to this concept, giving us an introductory framework. I think you're starting off our conversation so well. And so I'm grateful. This time to join into this conversation, we have Reverend Mia and Reverend Ryon. Mia, would you start us off, introduce yourself and give us your context, and then Ryon will do the same.
Great. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mia McClain. I am the senior pastor at Riverside Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. Prior to that, I was the associate pastor at Myers Park Baptist Church in Charlotte. So, you know, from alliance to alliance. Although I am ordained UCC, I am very much at home in the Alliance and the UCC. So glad to be here. I came from a predominantly white setting that was diversifying. You know, we were making huge strides in that arena, but still in the wealthiest neighborhood in Charlotte and still a white dominant context. I'm now in a predominantly Black church that used to be a predominantly white church, but it started integrating in the 70s because the neighborhood changed. And as the neighborhood changed, the people changed, and they were intentional about integration. And so we are certainly in a period right now where we're waiting to see what happens as gentrification takes over and the neighborhood shifts again. We are still very multicultural in the way we do things, but we are seeing a different crop of people coming into the neighborhood, which might change our racial dynamic.
Great. Thanks, Malu and Mia, Danny. That was so very wonderful to have you start us off. My name is Ryon Price. I'm the senior pastor at Broadway Baptist Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We are a historic congregation going all the way back to 1882, just south of downtown. We are a historically white congregation, one which, it must be said from the outset, for the first 70 years of our existence was segregated by de facto and also law congregation. And so that obviously shapes a great deal of our history. We're also a church that built its sanctuary in 1952, and then our current sanctuary in 1952, and then the neighborhood around us really changed dramatically over the following 50 or so years. And so we are actually currently in the zip code, which has the lowest life expectancy in all of the state of Texas. And so when Danny was talking about the sociological ills of our congregational setting, that may not necessarily be reflective of the makeup of our membership, but certainly in the context of where we are located, it is one that has shaped our history a great deal. In some ways, like Mia has just said, our congregation, the immediate area around us is beginning to actually gentrify as well. And so while for the last 40 or so years, a great deal of our effort, missions work has really been around issues of charity and kind of first level, base level housing, homelessness issues, food insecurity issues. I think our church that's shaped us a great deal. We recognize that the changing neighborhood is going to have impact for us. So that kind of reflection on where we are is a really important thing, and I'm grateful for Danny starting us off in that respect.
Well, thank you. So first, the first question I would like to ask, well, actually, Mia and Ryan, after hearing Danny, is there anything that was kind of sparked in you that you would like to name before I go straight into my first scripted question? Is there anything that came up in you? I think Ryan, you already said in terms of the lowest life expectancy. That's startling. Anything else that came up for you guys though while you were listening that you want to name?
Thank you, Danny, for that presentation. Just remembering, I have a mental health first aid, but I want to take it again because it's been years. But just sort of remembering the type of work that I've been doing so far since I've been in DC has definitely been the work that tends to what we would not consider spiritual, right? So mutual aid, people coming to me for mutual aid, people coming to me for assistance with burial, and not even financial, just like I need help on the phone because these people are about to get me to curse them out type of help, Mm-hmm. And that type of pastoral and spiritual care is something that I'm used to because I kind of come from a context like that and I did CPE. But if you did not have those experiences, and you think coming into this is just going to be some spiritual work, it's very difficult to do all of the things. And so I'm grateful for my previous experiences. I'm happy that I'm glad that you highlighted that, Danny, because it's important for the work that we've been called to.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would probably add to what I already said a moment ago is I think centering that word self is one that is a really, I think, helpful and important counter narrative to so much of what we have tended to speak about, preach about, which is selflessness within Christian contexts. And recognizing the value of the self is such an essential, I think, reframing for us that I really, really appreciated what Danny did there.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Okay, so let me ask you, how does your either anyone can start, you can all just jump in, so whoever. But how does your view of your relationship with the community outside of your congregation, what is that view? What is your view of your relationship with the community outside your congregation, especially in terms of Black and brown folks? Like, how do you conceptualize that relationship? Because I think, again, if you're shifting to the idea of, oh, these are folks that need my care, then first you have to shift towards seeing them and understanding, So talk to me about how you view this relationship. And I guess for you, Mia, it can be folks inside and outside of the church in your context. And Ryon, it seems like it might be more outside, but if you have an inside outside, that's fine as well. Sure, whoever.
Ryon, you want to go first?
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I think by and large it is outside, although like Mia was saying in her former congregation in Myers Park, there is a shift that's taking place within Broadway as well, which we certainly affirm and have more persons of color that are a part of our congregational life now than there were 10, 20 years ago. But for most of the history of our congregational context has really been one of, I would say, advocacy but maybe more fundamentally charity. Mm-hmm. And so that relationship has been by and large one that I think on the positive side, you might call it charitable. You could also call it paternalistic in some ways as well. Mm-hmm. And so, I think we're doing a lot of reframing around our understanding of that. And then also moving from baseline charity, which I think is always necessary. Obviously, caring for the needs of the body are essential, but also adding in the call to advocacy, to work for justice. And so that's been a pretty significant shift for us, I think, over the last probably 2 decades, but certainly over the last 5 years, in really reframing some things and really focusing our work, and then really looking at other congregations, resources within the community, especially Black and brown communities, to think in ways of which we can partner together what they are already doing versus what we want to invite them to come and do with us. I think that's a major reframing for us, and a part of our own self-discovery and recognizing that we have a lot to learn, and that a church like ours doesn't have to be the leader in everything.
You said a lot of good stuff there. I was going to ask you, what were some of the reframes that you did? But then at the end, you just listed so many of them. And so I deeply appreciate that. I would definitely say, though, shifting from thinking that you have to lead all the time to figuring out how to follow, right? That's something that Tamarie is another person in the Alliance and also in ACPE land, but she talks a lot about white folks learning how to follow and how much of that can, how just very difficult that is, because everything in training in white culture is not say follow Black and brown people, right? And so that's a major reframe that you guys were able to do. Yeah.
Well, and let me say we're working on it.
That you're working on it, right? That you're working out. I got you.
That's a long journey. We're an old church, so we got a long ways to go.
I got you. You're right. I mean, and that's true though, right?
And I've got my own history,
though, is
right?
Never over. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Danny, Mia, jump in.
I'm sorry. Were you gonna say something first, Mia? Something in this question. As I reflect on this question, how do you view your relationship with the community outside, especially in terms of caring for Black and brown care? I often wonder, or something I've been reflecting on as of late in Christian communities in particular, is how do we see the community as our parishioners as well? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes we're used to only seeing our parishioners as those who show up on Sunday morning to our church. But I'm wondering, can we reframe our minds to thinking about your community is also those people who are in the community where your church resides, who don't show up to church on Sundays, but may still be in need of sociological resources that you can provide. If COVID-19 taught us anything, I think COVID-19 taught us we have to re-examine or redefine how we understand membership. Is membership just those people showing up on Sundays physically in person, or is membership people who are watching our Facebook Live worship services on Sunday mornings from Facebook or social media or some other streaming platform? And so I think if we can begin to see our membership or our parishioners as also those folks in the community, I think it will also shape how we're showing up in some sense.
That's well said. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say something similar, Danny. Thank you for that. Reframing who our community is, but also from my context, sometimes we talk about the justice efforts as outside of ourselves when actually the work needs to be done on the inside. And so I come from one of those churches, both my prior church and this one, that gives out money, right? We every year we say, okay, we're blessed to have an endowment. We're going to give 10,000 here and 10,000 there. And I'm really proud of that. And also there are people in my congregation who don't have a car. So what are we really saying about poverty, about Black and brown people in the community when we actually have members who don't have what they need to survive? But we're always like thinking of it outside of ourselves and our call to do justice outside. And so I'm trying to shift the narrative this year to start doing some intentional internal work within our congregation. And I tell people, we just started the pantry in the fall. And I tell people at the church all the time, this is for you too. If you need to go in there and get something, you go in there and get something. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not just for our neighbors around the corner. If you need food, go get it. And I've had to say that a couple of times, but I've also had to remind people that they have to tell us what they need. So I got on somebody this week and I said, well, if you're having trouble getting to church because you don't have the funds to get on the metro, you need to tell me that, right? So you can't just be walking around puffing and puffing and mad because we gave $10,000 here, but you can't get to church. Where is the space where we're creating vulnerable opportunities for vulnerable conversation within our context so people feel safe enough to say, I actually don't have food this week. I actually don't have train fare. Is there any way you can help? And so that's a culture shift though, because I think it's easier when we view the unmattering of Black lives as a problem that is distant. It is not distant. And sometimes it's right next to us in the pew and we just have no idea. So that's one thing that I've been thinking about and reflecting on in terms of pastoral care. And the other thing, just sort of adding on to what I shared earlier about sort of being the chaplain and the things that I've been called to, not being specifically spiritual care, the mutual aid stuff, we're getting to the point now where the asks are coming in from all over the city, not even in our Southwest DC neighborhood. And people aren't really coming to the church for money. They're really calling because they are in dire straits. They're at their wits' end, as somebody might describe it, dealing with governmental agencies for food stamps and dealing with governmental agencies for burial assistance. So how do we show up as an advocate in those situations? So that's something I've been thinking through and dealing with the past couple of months, just with a few individuals, just doing basic advocacy. Like I'll sit on the phone with you while you stand in line at the government office that's giving you a hard time, just to make sure nothing goes awry. So.
God, there's so much to highlight from everything that y'all just said. I'm here taking notes. I'm in the panel, but I'm taking notes from y'all, just so you know. But one of the things that I think the biggest thing I'm hearing that I just want to name too is this understanding that what seems like it may be out there for whatever reason it's way closer than we realize. And so that's part of bridging this gap, is to understand that these things aren't as far away, and we're not as quote unquote unbothered by them as we think we might be. I really appreciate that. Danny, were you getting ready to say something?
Yes.
Okay, jump on back in.
I was so loving. Thank you so much, Mia. I was so loving these connections, because for me, I'm also wanting to push back on, I would say, what you're doing in your advocacy is spiritual care. So like, how do we redefine pastoral care or spiritual care to be advocacy of sitting on the phone with somebody as they're in the office getting frustrated, trying to get sociological resources? Like, in some sense, I would love for us to like redefine how we understand pastoral care to be exactly what you just highlighted. I also am wrestling with, today is election day. I live in Chicago, and today is our mayoral elections and our elections for alderpersons. And for the first time in years in Chicago, we have many clergy who decided to put their name in the hat and run for alderpersons, to be aldermen and alderwomen in particular wards around the city. And so this conversation is also making me think, what are the ways in which we as church pastors maybe need to even redefine our calls to ministry to maybe be, in addition to being responsive to sociological ills and, responding to the ills by providing charity, what are the ways in which maybe somebody on our Zoom call tonight is called to run for some sort of political legislative office, in some sense? Like, we have clergy now in the Chicagoland area, like I said, who are running for political office. We have clergy now who are also in the Chicago area running for or creating social service organizations, LLCs, 501c3s, and becoming executive directors of the local food pantry, right? And so I think this conversation also challenges us to redefine how we understand call to ministry. Is call to ministry just being pastor or chaplain, or is my call to ministry could also be, I'm executive director of the local homeless shelter in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So weird.
Ryan?
I'm sorry, I was probably just talking to myself saying that's so good. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I understand.
I didn't know y'all could hear that.
Oh, no problem. Sorry. So many different places I want to go, but I'm trying to stay on topic.
I may say one thing, and just to follow up what Mia and said, which is I've really been thinking like how I was trained that pastoral care is what you give in a very particular kind of way, like it's a one-on-one conversation about one's soul, or it's going to see a family in a particular situation. But I was talking with someone today, and I think this really reflects exactly what Mia and Danny were saying, that public policy engagement is pastoral care for the community.
Yes, it is.
And so I think that's one thing we've seen at Broadway is an engagement on public policy issues has been seen as an expression of care from persons outside of our own congregational context.
Yes. Yeah. That's it. I'm like, that's like mic drop moment. I'm like, yep, that's it. We're going to keep talking, but yes. So let me ask you this, in terms of how does class impact this dynamic that we're talking about here? Because we're talking about the idea of advocacy. We're talking about the idea of shifting the relationship so that it's not paternalistic, so that it's partnering. We're talking about making sure that we understand, like I said, advocacy and justice is a part of spiritual care. Does class play a role in this that needs to be discussed? I venture to say yes, because a lot of the churches in the Alliance tend to lean middle class, upper middle class, and I think that says something about us. So what say you all? Not, uh-oh.
It does. It plays a lot. Oh, sorry. I'm mumbling like I'm
Right. I'm like, you gotta speak up. You say it plays a large role.
It plays a huge part in this. Yes, it plays a huge part in this, and shifting the culture, not so much away from, expanding the notion. I follow Rabbi Danielle Ruttenberg's model of what justice is, and she breaks it down into the three parts. Hesed, which is kind of like loving kindness, your food pantry, praying for people. Then she talks about tzedakah, which is like the next level of starting to do some deeper work. And then she says we should get to the place of tzedek, which is like advocacy, justice. We want equity. We want to ask why is the playing field not equal, et cetera, et cetera. And so shifting, and not away from Hesed or not away from that, but expanding our view of justice in middle to upper class settings has been a challenge, because the go-to formula for justice work was, we're going to cut a $100,000 check, which is necessary if you have those resources. But as we've even seen in those communities, those resources are dwindling. And so we can't cut a $100,000 check like we used to. So now it's $50,000, and then next year is $30,000. And so who are we going to be now that our community is changing? The people who used to give six-figure gifts a year are no longer able to, because they passed away. So that means that we have to shift our approach to what justice looks like and our role in it. And so that has been a challenge, and even between the two congregations, less so on this congregation that I'm at now, because it's not quite as upper class, but I say it's a solid middle class, and they're still getting used to having actual church members who need the food pantry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Malu, we were certainly a very well-to-do. I'm sorry.
Sorry, one thing. Can you please? Oh, never mind. She put it in the chat. Never mind. They were asking for the name again, but she saw it. Okay, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I think Mia was saying something really important that's probably true about a lot of Alliance churches. Certainly true about Broadway, is that we were once richer than we were. I think there's a church in Revelation that's like that. We know, we've heard you're rich or something, but you're poor. So we kind of have both of those. But this history of being the wealthy church, but we were kicked out of the Southern Baptist Convention in the early 2000s over issues of LGBTQ inclusion, and it means that we're a different church fundamentally than we were at one time, and our racial and certainly our class dynamics have changed. I mean, we've gone from being a much more well-heeled group to we got a lot of teachers and a lot of social workers and a lot more single parent families, grandparents who are raising their children. We have a lot more, kids of varying socioeconomic classes. And, I think it's freeing. I think we're not just talking about those people. We are talking about the body of Christ that belongs to Broadway Baptist. And so, I think that it necessitates, we don't have as much money as we once had, but I think we engage these issues from a much more bodily, incarnate kind of experience. That's true about our lived experience together as a community.
Yeah. Thank you. It was one of those questions where I knew it had an impact. I just wanted to hear you guys speak on it. I think that one of the major shifts is, like you said, is realizing, I like what you said, is freeing to know that all of these people belong in the body of Christ. And to think about that as, I think if we learn how to take the societal judgment off of the isms, right? Because we like to act as if being poor is a moral failing in this country, right? There's no morality around poverty. So when you can take that away, then when you start to have a congregation that more aptly reflects what's going on in your community, in the nation, it does become exciting. I like that you said it's freeing, and you even did I don't know if you saw yourself, but your fingers moved. But I like that, right? Because there is a certain amount of embodiment of the fact of like, now we are free to be our authentic selves and to care amongst ourselves. And I think that's an important shift. The other shift it makes me think about for the Alliance, though, is that when the Alliance is looking to partner, right? If you know that you are a church with a whole lot of money and you want to partner, find you another church comparably to partner with, right? If you're going to do certain kind of things. Or like you said, Ryon, if you're the church with a whole bunch of money, then learn fellowship. Figure out what the other churches are doing, because even though they don't have a lot of money, like Mia said, everything the church doing, it ain't got to come from money. You can have a robust church that's not making a whole lot, right? So then how do you then partner with the church and practice fellowship, right? Trusting that there's no moral failings. And in fact, these folks who are poor probably could learn how, we could probably learn how to, get by, save $1 or $2 from them. Do you see what I'm saying? So, yeah, that's kind of where my mind was going when I was asking about that. So yeah. So one of the other things that we had discussed, we wanted to highlight was kind of this idea of, and you started to talk about it, Mia, but what does it mean to be prophetic in these different kind of congregational settings, right? Like, because if you're in a congregation where there is more day-to-day struggle and there is more marginalized identities and oppression that gets lived out through you and upon you, prophetic in that sense sounds a kind of way. And then if you live a life where you have less of an impact, but all the isms, they run through all of us, right? So they're through all of us all the time, but you don't have the oppressive impacts as much of the isms, and you have what you need. Well, what does prophetic look like in that situation, right? So can you wrestle with that? Anybody who wants to jump in, say a little bit more about how do we wrestle with that in our Alliance context as well? Oh, and let me just remind all the people listening, I see people in the chat. I love it. I love the conversation in the chat. Also, if you have a question that you would like to ask, feel free to put it in the chat as well. But okay, go ahead.
I think my preaching changed, my prophetic voice changed as my context shifted. And we all have to be careful of the word we. And so sometimes there is this idea that, oh, these people look like me, so we are all coming from the same perspective, and there is no we. That's the biggest mistake that I think we make in all of our churches. I mean, there is no collective we when we're talking about what we should be doing and what we should be feeling. And there are people, and even, being in a progressive church, I have said some things and I made assumptions about people's political stances on, I don't know, whatever I was talking about. And they will come to me after I'm actually a little bit more conservative than that. And it just reminds me that even in these settings that might be more homogenous, or there's an appearance, a facade that we have these agreed statements on LGBTQ inclusion and statements on racial justice, that everybody is approaching it from the same perspective. And so I am learning, I haven't figured this out yet. I am learning to be more specific in my prophetic voice. And I think moving to DC really forced me, I can no longer just be like, and the government needs to blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Half my people work for the government and they're doing good things in the government. They don't all do, they're not doing terrible things. So that has forced me to clarify, what do I mean by abolition? What does that look like in practice? And really be specific. When I say justice, what do I mean? I just preached a sermon and I had to go through the different types. I'm moving away from restorative and I'm moving towards transformative. And this is what that means. And not assuming that everybody knew what I was talking about. I think it's very key. And as we try to craft our prophetic voice in any congregation, Yeah, that's what I'll stop there. And Ryan or Danny can jump in.
Well, that's huge. I'm gonna let them jump in, but that's huge also because part of what I hear you saying is you have to create the models for them to be able to kind of latch on and understand what you're saying. You that framework of different types of justice and showing them your journey can help them also feel more equipped to take a journey because it's a journey, you know? Yeah, that's good. Ryan, Danny?
I want to invite Mia to come down to Texas. She can still preach against the government down here for
Right.
sure. So,
you know,
I think one of the important shifts at Broadway that we are working towards prophetically, I think, comes out of something that William Sloane Coffin used to say, is that we talk a lot about the priesthood of all believers, but he wanted to claim the prophethood of all believers. And, really trying to empower a voice within the congregation on issues of justice so that it's not just one single person. It, I think, is a really, important shift for our church, but has so much more potential efficacy on so many more issues than just the meetings that I could personally attend. So I think that that's an important part. I'm not sure, Malu, that answers your question, but it's just something that when the word prophet, prophetic is raised, it's one that really comes to my mind to begin to empower people to think of themselves as capable of speaking a prophetic word in their own situations, or going before the city council, or whatever it may be.
No, I mean that does answer my question, because that adds another dynamic. I had never heard that phrase, the prophethood of all believers. I love that. I've never heard that before. Can you say whose theory that was again?
That was William Sloane Coffin. I don't know where he was the pastor of the other Riverside church, Mia.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
But yeah, and I don't know that was original to him, but he used to use that language quite a bit.
I like that. I appreciate that. Danny, you jumping in with anything?
Yeah, there's a particular question that I tend to like to ask people to reflect on. And that question is, who is not at this table? When we're getting ready to make a decision about something, when we're thinking about our ministries, when we're thinking about our vision and mission for the church, who is not at the table? And however we choose to define that, I think that becomes pivotal. I also like to turn to the wheel of power and privilege. And so I invite people to check that out. You can simply Google the wheel of power / privilege. If I can share my screen real quick, I can
hold on 1 second.
Real
You
quick.
can also drop it in the chat too.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, we can do both. I'm gonna have you share. I'm gonna have you. I made you a co-host. You're a co-host now. Okay.
Okay.
And you can drop the link in the chat. But yeah, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay. This cool wheel that asks us to think about whatever we're deciding for the mission and vision of our church. Is it only certain people at the table? And who are those people? And if you were to line those people up on this wheel, whoever's at the table, wherever they fit on this wheel, you would look at the empty spaces on this wheel where you don't have people at the table under these categories that are left open. And you would say to yourself, okay, how do we get people at the table who are open spaces on this wheel that we currently don't have representation for? Does that make sense, or is that that's confusing? Okay. And so
makes sense to me, yeah.
I think that becomes pivotal in how we craft our ministries, how we craft our vision and our mission for the church, to really ask that hard question in some sense.
Yeah. Thank you. Also, can you take the copy the website, copy the website and put the link in the chat is what I'm trying to say.
Got it.
If you send
Okay.
it to everyone, that means that
Got
they
it.
should be able to open it. There we go. Thank you.
Got it.
Yes, thank you. I love that. Yes, I do a lot with my students around that too. Around, first of all, can you identify where you are on that wheel and what that means for yourself? Can you identify yourself on it? And then if you start to think communally, then yes, how does your community show up on that wheel and what does that mean for you? That's excellent. Yeah. Oh, we do have a question in the chat that I think is actually worth looking at real quick. Is around how do we know what it is to be prophetic as opposed to taking a political stance? Now, I would push and say being prophetic is taking a political stance. I'm just going to say that. I don't think you can be prophetic and not take a political stance. But I do understand the idea of who gets to decide what's prophetic, right? Anybody want to take a stab at that through the Alliance of Baptist lens and through the UCC? Danny, are you UCC?
UCC,
Okay.
yes.
UCC and Alliance lens. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Through those lenses, does anybody want to take a stab at this notion of to be prophetic? Okay. Danny. Okay, there you go.
Okay. I immediately think of Jesus and why Jesus was crucified. I immediately think that Jesus was crucified for political reasons. It was disrupting the political structures of Caesar. And to be prophetic for me means engaging in political oppression, the way Jesus engaged in political oppression and therefore was crucified. Jesus' whole, theologically, Jesus' whole reason for dying was because of his disturbance of political structures during that time. And so that's my own definition of prophetic. The prophetic is political.
Mm-hmm.
There's an amazing book that I would invite folks to check out. Obery Hendricks has this amazing book. Oh God, why am I blanking on his name?
God's Politics?
Yes, The Politics of Jesus.
That's it.
The Politics of Jesus. Okay,
right. Yes,
yeah.
yes. That's the citation for that. The Politics of Jesus. Yes. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't get somebody else had it right in the chat, but I had the idea. And it is a great book. You know, I think it's an interesting question, like who gets to decide what prophetic is. Our church has a committee structure, a justice committee structure that we formed really in response to after the murder of George Floyd. And so a part of what they do is, I suppose, prioritize the areas we formally wish to work on. But I think when I see that wheel that Danny just presented, I think sometimes our own structures get in the way of us being truly prophetic as well, because we are very orderly and we have a committee structure, committee on committees and whatnot. And so, having the right people in the room to decide those questions is, I think that's an important question. So I would say, in a community, it may be that wheel is helpful in determining what we could prophetically engage in. And so I also, I don't obviously know where the question was coming from, but sometimes I've had conversations where people are like, well, what did we mean by justice? Let's define that. We would really like to define that. So, we'll just chase the tail, and it's an act of distraction that moves us away from the actual action because they want us to define justice, or what do you mean
Yeah.
by prophetic? So I don't want that to become the thing that we spend 3 years studying on and not make progress on important issues. So I would say, where is the pain, and how can we speak to the pain? I think that's an important way of us engaging prophetically in the world.
Yes.
To alleviate the pain.
I just want to say something in relation to that. Thank you for bringing that up, Ryan, about the process of defining things and getting caught up in words and syntax. And even tonight's title of The Age of Black Lives Matter, that was a huge issue at my previous church. We had something out there about Black Lives Matter, and the people were like, but I heard that the people were stealing money, and we need to think about if we want to affiliate with, we're like, Black Lives Matter regardless of the trademark organization, and so I started shifting my language to the mattering of Black lives, to just to throw them off and to be like, I'm not talking about the organization, I am not affiliated with them, though I supported the local chapter in some of their endeavors, but people got really caught up in just all kinds of language stuff and wanted to spend time talking about that instead of doing the work of understanding the mattering of, or the cyclical unmattering of Black lives in this country. Instead of wanting to understand that, we get caught up in the language and what is justice. So anyway.
Yeah. The cyclical unmattering of Black lives. That's it right there. I mean, the phrase, not anyway. So it's 8:10. Okay, I'm just thinking about time. We're starting to get into the last kind of few minutes that we have of our time together. One of the things we also we thought it was important to spend some time talking about was the difference between intent and impact, or intent and outcomes. Now, we thought that was important to talk about because the easiest way to put this is white folks in America tend to get stuck up on intent. What did I intend to do? What was my intention? And Black and brown folks tend to get stuck up on impact. What happened to me or my people? What didn't happen to me or my people? And that's, I think, that the difference between intent and impact, and kind of talking that through with Alliance churches seeking to do this kind of work, I think is important. So, Ryan, you want to? I see you got the look like you got something to say.
Okay. Well,
start us off.
Malou and I were having this conversation a few days ago when we were planning for this talk tonight. So, or this discussion tonight. We just had something. We were in worship planning at Broadway not long ago, and we've had a few things that have come up liturgically that I think have been problematic. Not only, maybe less so theologically in the sense of the strict theological language in a Platonic form, but there's no such thing. We're living in a context. We have a history, and our words are deeply shaped by the context in which we are inheriting. That's the way that they're heard. When we read the book of John, it says the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. We have to unpack that. We have to think about how that's being heard. And so there was a problematic hymn, and we had a discussion on our team, and I think there were folks that were saying, well, that's not the intent. And we really came down at the end saying, we cannot sing that language because of the impact. And I think that's an important shift. And it feels very, I think maybe perhaps shame inducing for white folks, and they can feel like, getting your hand slapped or something. You didn't mean to do it. But I think we also have to recognize, if you can't understand that impact, then you're really not listening. You're really not in a place of deep listening about the pain of what has happened and what could still be caused. And so I think this, it's an important thing that we have to be very careful of. I think in the context of especially Alliance churches, because we're coming out of a certain history by and large and trying to embrace something new.
Thank you.
I was just going to follow up and say, when we were talking about this earlier and you brought that up, Ryan, I started thinking about a lot of the decolonizing of liturgical practices that need to be done if we are, and that's a pastoral care charge as well. You know,
Yes, it is.
we do worship. What are we saying? What is your confession saying? If we're like, we need to repent for our racism, and you have 3 Black people sitting in there like, no, I don't. So like,
Right.
what are we saying when we're writing our prayers, or, you know, we're calling for action? Again, that word "we," you know, it gets tricky. And so I think it leads us to do a lot more thinking about all of the different parts of our liturgies. This is not just a theoretical thing that we talk about in a boardroom for outreach meeting, but it actually shows up on Sunday morning as well.
Danny, anything? You don't have to. It's okay.
Not for this question. No, I got something for another one.
Okay. All right. Well, I really also want to say too that the process of decolonizing the liturgy and holding people accountable for intent and impact. The other thing is, we also have to remember, if we really believe that racism has ill effect on white people too, that patriarchy has ill effect on men too, right? If you believe that, which I completely 100% do, then doing the work of decolonizing liturgy, doing the work of intent and impact, is actually the work to like reestablish full humanity. Do you know what I mean? Like if you really believe that these isms are detracting from the full humanity of the people who have the power, not just the people who are on the underside of it, then doing this kind of work, again, is spiritual care. And I think it's a reinstating is not quite the word I want to say, but I can't think. A reinstating of full humanity is what I'm thinking. Okay, so we have a couple more questions. So let me go to Danny. Danny, which question were you looking at next? Because I want to see which one you were talking about and make sure we get.
I'm sorry, I hit the wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna take away your host privileges
I'm
because
I'll mess it up. Your box is right next to my box.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No problem. All right.
The compounded grief.
Okay, yeah, that's where I was going next. So let's talk about it. So one of the things that we were also discussing when we met before today to prepare for our conversation with you all, it was this notion of compounded grief, and how that affects the body, meaning the congregation, but more so the body, because we now understand the congregation we've established is more than just who's in the pews, right? And how does that affect the pastoral care in your congregation? So yeah, we can go there next. That's where I was headed. So let's do it. Especially, we know compounded grief right now. How many people have died with COVID? Just COVID alone. But you get COVID in the mix. Then you get, since COVID tapered off, the shootings, the public shootings and things have started back up. And I'm talking about the mass shootings, right? Then you do the systemic violence with Black and brown bodies. I mean, so the grief is, it's real. And then the politics. Okay, I'll stop talking. Oh, okay, and climate change. Okay, now I'll shush. Now y'all talk. Okay.
I wonder, how do we begin to connect the dots between mental health therapy and our congregation? Meaning, in what ways do we, for example, bring in mental health therapists to help our members of our congregation from a therapeutic perspective work through their grief? We have youth pastors, senior pastors, pastors for women's ministry, pastors for men's ministry. But what would it look like to have the pastor for mental health therapy as an ordainable call, as a actual ministry in our church, right? And so first and foremost, I think we need to shift our staffing and how we understand our ministry staffing and bring in qualified therapists, um, counselors, folks who are credentialed to actually serve on our ministry, on our ministry staff. That's one. Number two, I'm reflecting on this calendar. Oh God, I'm blanking on the name. It's a calendar where you can see it's awareness of different health issues for every month.
Oh, okay,
An
cool.
awareness calendar, I guess that's the
Okay.
name of it. A health awareness calendar. You can
Mhm.
Google that, and so then every month you would learn that a particular month is a health awareness topic, right? And so I do know, for example, September is Suicide Awareness Month,
Mhm. Mhm.
or May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so
Mhm.
I'm often wondering, for example, what are the ways in which we can take these particular months, for example, and do something around, now maybe I'm connecting the dots to our liturgy, but do something where we examine, oh, wow, I wonder if Apostle Paul wrestled with being bipolar,
Wouldn't that be something?
right? What would it look like? What would it look like to read the epistles of Paul through the lens of mental illness? And that Apostle Paul was given a lot of Kanye West energy. I know, sorry. Okay.
I don't mind you saying it, but
Right. But what would it look like if we were to re-examine particular biblical characters, for example, through the lens of wrestling with particular mental illness um, conditions, and so that also becomes a way that we can begin to initiate conversations around grief and the therapeutic resources we are providing for people to help people work through this grief. How are we even talking about grief from behind the sacred desk? Are we saying people can pray their grief away? Or are we saying no? How about in our Sunday bulletins? Here's the website, psychologytoday.com, where you can go click on this website and look for a therapist, right? I really do think this grief, this issue of compounded grief, means we have to take into consideration making therapeutic resources. The same way I say we make sociological resources, how are we making therapeutic resources to help us grapple with our grief in some sense?
Mm.
Yeah, Malu, I would just respond to that by saying, kind of back to what I was saying earlier. Sometimes our organizational framework gets in our way. Like a lot of our structures, the way we think about missions, the way we think about properties, or whatever it may be, we have these kind of set standing committees in a lot of our communal structures. And what Danny is saying is, not only maybe do we need to restaff, but maybe reorganize in new ways as well. That's what she's saying makes me think like, I feel like we organize in ways that may not necessarily be conducive to being the most help to where we are today and what the critical needs are.
Yeah. That's well said. I mean, a lot of what I heard in too is first and foremost is just to normalize the notion that we have mental health needs, right? Like, how could you not? How could, like, literally, when I think about my social location, my age, my social location, and some of the particulars of my history, when I'm like, yes, I deal with depression, I manage it well. The idea, like, how could I not? The idea that someone could be my age, be Black, be queer, be all these things, and not have some sort of mental health situation would be miraculous, right? I'm sure they're out there and God bless them. But how do we normalize it? How do we staff around it? How do we organize around it? Like, because if we normalize the mental health, that means also normalizing our limitations. And how do we organize around healthy limitations? and healthy, like, I don't even know what that means, right? Like, yeah.
To speak to what you just said, Malou, about mental health being, how do we normalize that people need that care? I was just at a Baptist Justice event this weekend, and a guy spoke about his work with mental health. And he goes to different churches and he trains lay leaders on basically like a mental health first aid, but they get like an additional training. They get like a spiritual care element to it and stuff like that. And he's saying, look, here are the numbers. More people need mental health care than you need in mental health wellness. There are not enough therapists. There are not enough affordable places. There's not enough group therapy options. So the church has to sort of treat mental health care like Stephen's ministry. I don't know if y'all know what that is, but the Stephen.
Yeah.
If we treated it like that, it doesn't mean that people are going to start to act like they are licensed clinical social workers, but we're giving them the tools to be able to recognize stuff and to be able to jump in and help if there's a crisis. And that's part of our prophetic call, particularly in this age, as we're seeing a rise in suicide rates between the age of 14 and 35.
Amen. This is the worst transition I've ever done, but I just realized what time it is. And so I was trying to figure out some way to have some powerful like transition, but honestly, my brain is like, oh, it's 8:25. Oh, snap. Okay. Let me ask each of you, first of all, let me say thank you. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and could really keep talking to you. I'm not going to do it tonight because I'm tired, but I could, right? Like I could. And that's a good sign. And folks have seemed to really enjoy it. They seem to be engaged. I appreciate that. Is there any final word you want to say, not like for all eternity, but just kind of final word on this subject? Anything you want to offer as we wrap up our time together? No, that's okay. All right, that's fine. You've been having mic drop moments the entire time. So let me say thank you again. I'm gonna unpin you guys for just a second so you don't have to be on the camera anymore. Okay, just me. Hey guys. So here's the last thing I want to invite you all to do is two things. One, okay, I'm actually putting the link in the chat. But if you click on that, for those of you who may or may not be privy to this, if I just put the link in the chat to register for the next one. So if you click on that, you can go ahead and register before you leave today. And here is what it's, there we go. Good grief, I was trying to share my slide. Okay, so we've had our first conversation today. And like I said, we're going to continue this conversation on the 21st, 7 p.m. Eastern. And so that's when Reverend Tara Gibbs is going to be with us. And so she's going to do another little bit of framing in the beginning, and then we're going to break off into small groups, because what we have found in doing this work is that you guys really benefit from getting the concept and then talking it out amongst yourselves and thinking it out amongst yourselves and figuring out, what is viable and for your particular congregation. And you guys really enjoy when you're able to do that for yourselves. So on that note, I will simply say thank you again. Thank you so much for being here. I'll remove my pen as well so you can all see each other. So thank you all for being here. And I hope that you have come away with some, maybe if your church is already doing stuff, maybe you feel affirmed in some of the things your church is already doing. That's always nice when you can get some affirmation. And that if not, that you will also feel inspired. Maybe there's some things that your church or that you personally need to be doing in terms of caring for yourself. Don't forget the self means you as well, right? But also there's some things your congregation might be needing to do. So I hope that you were able to have that from this experience. And I look forward to being with you guys on the 21st. So thank you.